We've had a crazy week after the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump.
It's the Secret Service's biggest crisis in decades.
The Secret Service is under intense scrutiny following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump.
Where is the Secret Service?
Yeah, 100%, right?
The Secret Service are everywhere. They don't make mistakes.
There are so many parallels with Israel and what happened on October 7th, and that's why I'm so worried for America.
Internal investigation by Israel's military has acknowledged that its troops failed to protect civilians during Hamas's October 7th terror attacks.
A deadly drone strike early today in Tel Aviv, just a block from the U.S. consulate.
Israel had been tracking the unmanned aircraft, but lost it as it came in from the sea.
People have a lack of faith in the system, and we're seeing it all over the United States, all over Western democracies, and we're seeing it in Israel as well.
We cannot move forward without knowing how deep and wide the rot was and is.
Welcome back to another episode of The Quad. This week, we unfortunately do not have our fearless leader, Fleur Hassan Nahum, but she will be back with us shortly in studio. We have Shama Meshtali, who is half Muslim, half Jewish, 100% Zionist, also a policy advisor and activist. And we have, of course, Vivian Berkovich, who is the former Canadian ambassador to Israel and the founder of the state of Tel Aviv. So without further ado, let's discuss what happened this past week. We've had a crazy week after the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. There has also been ongoing division, political division and polarization all over the world, but especially in Western democracies. What is your response to what happened last week and the trends that we're seeing? Shama, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. Well, it's clear that we haven't slept for a few days because things have been unraveling so fast. I would say that it surprised most of us because I think, as a recovering progressive, as our audience knows, when we would talk sort of in our circles previously about where political violence would come from, I would have never expected, no one would have expected that it would come from the anti-Trump clan. And so it's been really shocking, hard to grasp. But I think even more shocking is the outright denial that it even happened within the first couple of hours. The fact that it took the New York Times an hour to even report on it. The titles across the Washington Post and CNN and the New York Times. That
was it CNN that said Trump falls?
Yeah.
Trump
falls at a rally.
Yeah.
Or noise at a rally. Yeah. And it was just insane to see that level of reporting that is totally dismissive of reality, minimizing like an insane moment of political violence that should alarm everyone who cares about democracy and constitutional rights in America and elsewhere. And also this denial across social media that started to follow from people, particularly on the extreme left, who said that it was staged or that it didn't happen or that it was fake.
Or that it was Mossad. We're already getting that.
Yes.
The conspiracy theory.
Or that we do everything.
Everything.
We're full service. We just can't keep our own country together.
Exactly.
That's true.
Somehow.
We control the weather, we control the banks, we control the media, we control animals all over the world, but we can't control our own border.
It's crazy. And there's also a conspiracy theory that the shooter is Jewish that's circulating on TikTok. Somehow, I don't know if they found the picture with the shooter wearing a kippah, a yarmulke, or it was photoshopped. We don't even know. Last week we spoke about this information digital war. So we don't know what's real and what's not real, which is part of why we are in the state of affairs. But people are circulating this picture and saying, see, now you know, it's the Jews that did it. And I find that to be absolutely insane because why would Jews
didn't do it?
Well, because
wait, what? Checks notes.
And also just for anyone with half a brain, why would Jews want Trump dead when in reality, most of the Jews I know are actually voting for Trump, even though the Jewish vote was historically Democratic.
They're just not admitting it publicly.
Yeah, Vivian, what's your take on this? I mean, I think a lot of what we have seen is the result of like years of incitement. And you know, we're seeing it from the left to the right and the right to the left. Like, we're seeing it from both directions. Certainly, we've seen it from Trump for many years in the past. And it's alarming now that we start to see it in response on the left as well, at least speaking about the United States, and we'll get to Israel a bit after. What's your response to this incident?
So I'm going to kind of focus, like do the kind of focus in, the micro, and then zoom out. The incident in and of itself is alarming because for all the obvious reasons. I'm grateful that he survived and was just, I love to use the word grazed. You know, it's used
like a gentle,
right? It's such a bizarre word to use in this context. But what I find really disturbing, and one of the first things that occupied my mind was like, WTF, where is the Secret Service?
Yes, 100%.
Right? It's like they are infallible. The Secret Service are everywhere. They don't make mistakes. And it also kind of, you know, brought back to me the feeling I had on October 7th, which is, where is the IDF? Another institution that we think of as being infallible. So that I found very disturbing. Now, I'm old enough, I was a grown-up already when John Hinckley attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan. And I remember the shock then, too. And much of the rhetoric and discussion in those days was very similar about the divisiveness, the extremes of this public discourse, all this sort of stuff. And it was also like, I mean, I came of age and grew up and was very aware of things during the Vietnam War. So this kind of hostility, these deep divisions, they're not new. Like, we talk about it a lot as if this is something new.
So do you think they're more dangerous today than they were before?
I think that for me, and this is just my kind of thoughts today, but I think that they're more dangerous and amplified because of social media. And because when I grew up, you turned on the television and you watched whichever news you watched. In the States, it was NBC, ABC, CBS. We also had Canadian news. But they were very authoritative voices. And you didn't have all this craziness around. And now what we have, I think, is the exact opposite. It's all flipped. People don't trust the news, the legacy news at all. And they're all kind of curating their own sources of information. There's no due diligence. There's no way to check it, you know, the Keepa and all the AI. So it's a complete, pardon my French, shit show.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it really is. So, like, that's, like, I zoom in on the moment and I think, how did this happen? And then you zoom out and just deal with your rehabilitated, you know, progressive self.
Yeah.
I look at it and I say, this Secret Service group that was responsible for his protection, they are a direct consequence of DEI. You know, there's a lot of talk about the fact that a 5'5" woman is his close protection. It's ridiculous. You know, but Secret Service apparently has outrageous targets for women and minorities and all kinds of stuff. Well, I don't know. Like, maybe you don't DEI maybe you don't DEI the Secret Service because it's a very specific function they perform,
or apparently not perform. I mean, we were speaking before the show about, you know, the point at which this shooter is something that had been canvassed the day before by the Secret Service's own admission. So, like, what are you doing? How did this happen?
So this is the thing, and this is what I think we're all not saying, which is how much of this is just rank incompetence.
Mm-hmm.
How much of it, you know, then we have to get into the conspiracy theory world, which I'm not promoting, but I'm just saying we see this in so many places. We saw it with the IDF on October 7th. Incompetence can only explain so much, right? And that's the stuff that really gets me, is because that's the really serious stuff that we just kind of gloss over. Is what the hell is going on in our institutions?
Totally. I love the point you brought up about, in a way, like the decentralization of leadership. The fact that we don't have any more centralized media.
We don't believe in the institutions.
We don't believe in institutions. We mistrust institutions and leaders. And yet we expect leadership. And we expect formal leadership in particular. And so we're kind of at this really interesting stage of trying to figure out what that looks like, especially in moments of crisis where you need leadership the most and it fails you the most.
And there was Trump demonstrating, dare I say it, leadership, fortitude, strength, character,
defiance.
What do you think?
I mean, I don't like Trump. I never liked Trump.
No,
but
not about Trump, just like in general.
I'm going to vote for him, of course, because who else is there? But in general, in regards to this issue, I mean, I agree with you. I think we're in a really dangerous place. And I think we're in a dangerous place because of what you said with social media, the amplification of this and how people are turning to so many different conspiracy theories instead of relying on the institute. Even the FBI investigating this, you know, people are attacking them. Everyone is attacking everyone. There's no one that we believe.
There's no safe
And it's good to be skeptical, and it's good to ask questions, and it's good to expose a conspiracy if there is one. But at the same time, that's like all societies are doing lately. And usually they aren't actual conspiracy theories. They're making stuff up, and that's very dangerous because it's impossible to have unity when you think everyone is against you and conspiring against you. How can you ever rely on a leadership or rely on election results? I mean, even going back to January 6th, how do we get into this? Because people have a lack of faith in the system. And we're seeing it all over the United States, all over Western democracies, and we're seeing it in Israel as well. And how can we not after what happened? I don't know what the answer is, but we're in a very, very difficult place with this issue, and it's not going to get better until we have some sort of leaders that are able to inspire people and pull them together, because there's no other way.
Yeah, you know, there are so many parallels with Israel and what happened on October 7th, and that's why I'm so worried for America. Because at the very least in Israel, you have this concept of a Jewish nation, and you have these Jewish values that at least keep civil society and people-to-people relationships together. You know, when institutions failed, when the government fails, civil society steps up and keeps some things flowing and working and kept together. In America, one, it's extremely divisive today, and I think part of that is the extremism is coming from both sides, and the only voices that are amplified on the media are the crazies on both sides and the conspiracy theories. And so there's little hope that I see for America to kind of rectify this divisiveness. And maybe there is hope in the fact that Trump chose J.D. Vance as his running mate, which is really
been very critical of him in the past.
Really interesting, because I think it's a very smart strategy to bringing a lot of moderates who have been disillusioned with the progressive left.
I mean, I think it's impossible to end this conversation without talking about the rhetoric itself that's being used in many different election campaigns. And I'll start with Israel because that's where we live. But, you know, the election rhetoric in the last few elections, of which we've had many, is very, very divisive. And we've seen a skewing towards more and more extreme rhetoric, and this idea that if X loses the election, whoever X is, it's the end of the country. We've seen it from Netanyahu himself multiple times. We've seen it from the left. If Netanyahu wins, it's the end of the country. And we see it now in America. If Trump wins, it's the end of democracy. It's the end of the United States. He's a dictatorship and all your rights will be taken away. We have to stop this. We have to stop this. I can't stand Joe Biden. I think he's a toxic influence on the world, and he is not doing anything to stop terrorism. He has emboldened the Islamic Republic. There is no one who's been more critical of Joe Biden's policy than me. If Joe Biden, by some miracle of God, wins the election, which will never happen because obvious reasons, but if he does win the election, I'm not going to go around saying it's the end of the world, because that's not what you do. There's a reason why politicians have concession speeches, because it's supposed to show a form of diplomatic respect for the opponent, and it seems like that's completely gone. And yes, that's also Trump's fault.
This kind of really intense, charged, violent rhetoric is not new. And it's something that I see it's being treated as it just kind of happened, you know, spontaneously and with social media. I think social media has exacerbated it. I think it's amplified it. I think that social media has given way too much room to voices that should never have any room. if we look at who are the leaders and who do people look up to, it's so-called influencers. And what's an influencer? I know, nothing personal. But
I am not an influencer.
But I mean, this whole concept of influencers is so not smart. And
it's not just not smart, it's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
You have people talking about terror organizations after being famous for TikTok dances. Like, it's ridiculous.
Exactly. It's very ridiculous. But those are the people who do have influence. I'm just trying to say that
they're not new concepts with what was facing.
And not just new concepts, but the behavior is nothing new. I really think that social media and what it rewards is new.
Yeah.
It brings me back to the Arab Spring, right? A huge responsibility was laid upon Facebook, right? And if it wasn't because of regular people filming protests in Tahrir Square in Egypt and filming their own videos and talking about their sort of day-to-day suffering and exposing that to the international community, well, first of all, the West would have never found out about the quote-unquote democratic uprisings of the Arab Spring, which obviously failed and were not really democratic in results whatsoever. But it's something that I think about a lot because it presents a lot of similarities between what happened in the Arab world 15 and 10 years ago and what is happening in the West today. And the concern is, just like we saw in the Arab world, Islamists trying to climb into power and doing it so well and so strategically through the use of elections, and basically where they consolidated power, turning those states into failed states, and where they didn't, it was, thank God, in many ways, because of military intervention. But that military intervention was not pretty. Hundreds of people died in Rabia in Egypt to kind of bring this. And Bahrain, of course, tanks were...
I know, but they get away with this. Can you imagine if we tried something?
Well, that's what I'm saying. And this precisely because the West is democratic. None of that is going to work. So all we're going to be left with is a brutal civil war that will bring about the end of Western civilization.
Right.
And we're really
You're like, it's fine, it'll be okay. And Shauna's like, it's the end of the world.
No, I'm not it's fine at all. I'm just like, I think it could end up a really big disaster. I'm just saying that this kind of behavior isn't new.
Well, we do have to wrap up this topic, but without further ado, I wanted to introduce our interview this week with the incredible Dalia Ziada, who is a repeat guest for us. But let's take a look at what she had to say.
So I'm here in Washington, D.C. with a friend of the program, Dalia Ziada, but also a very personal, close friend of mine. And it's always wonderful to see you, Dalia. We were together here a few months ago in D.C. when we went to APAC together. But since the time that I was here, you had quite an experience on a college campus, and we wanted to see if you'd tell us a little bit about it. You were invited to speak in the University of California, and somehow you were viciously attacked. So tell us a bit about what happened.
Thank you so much, Fleur. First of all, I'm very excited to be with you as always, and it's interesting. Do you remember the first time we spoke? It was on Zoom. I was just arriving to the U.S. after I was chased by radical Islamists and some Arabs and also the Egyptian government after daring to speak up against Hamas in the Egyptian media and other media outlets. So I thought that by then, by leaving this toxic environment in my country, my home country, Egypt, I'm over the struggle of being chased by Islamists and radicals. Unfortunately, it was not over. Just last month, I was invited to speak at the University of California at one of its major campuses. And it was a lecture about the Middle East, about the geopolitics of the Middle East, what's happening in the war. To my surprise, an Arab group, a group of Arab, and some of them are Americans also, sympathizing, Americans from Arab origins, from those who call themselves the Free Palestine movement. And some of them were even wearing this jihadist kufiya and all this stuff. They showed up at
your lecture?
At my lecture, they tried to harass me. The police intervened, of course, between me and them, but they tried to make a show out of it. And I think they were also planning to put it on social media or something just to show the world that they are attacking me. My problem here is not actually that they came after me. First of all, it's very shocking that these people exist in the US and they have the freedom and the space to do this. I thought, okay, it's fine to happen if this happens in the Middle East. In Egypt. So, yeah, exactly. And they have the space to do this. But how come they have the space to do this here in the United States and no one is punishing them?
Did the police protect you when they realized that these people were after you?
Actually, it was great how the police immediately acted on the issue. Of course, like how these people came closer to my lecture room is also very interesting. Let me tell you about it. Two of the women who was in the Arab mob, I call them, they were about 30 people. Two of the women, they are Arabs, they look Arabs. So they came to the guards, the university guards, and they told them they are my friends. So they allowed them into the lecture room. Of course, when they got into the room, they were very aggressive at me. All their questions were not about the topic, but just about me, attacking me, saying bad things about me. But I responded to them and I managed the situation. And they even at some moment tried to speak into Arabic. So they can see any bad things they want to say, any racial and discriminative and anti-Semitic things they want to say without the rest of the students who were present in the room could listen to them or could understand what they're saying. And then they insisted to take me outside to meet with other, they didn't tell me actually that there is a mob waiting for me outside. But at that moment, the police came because the organizers of the event, of the lecture, immediately called the police when they saw them coming into the room. And when the police came to me and said, there is a group of Arabs outside, a group of protesters outside who wants to speak with you. Are you going to speak with them? So while I was just telling the policeman, like, I cannot do that, it's dangerous for me, I'm already leaving Egypt and seeking asylum in the US, because of people like the people who are standing outside, two Egyptian men from the group that was waiting outside for me to come, entered into the corridor where I was standing with a policeman, and they started attacking me and yelling at me, saying things like, you're coward, why don't you come and speak with us? You're here to speak with the Jews and you don't want to speak with us. Things like insults, insulting me, but they didn't say it in English. They said it in an Egyptian dialect.
So the police didn't understand.
So the police wouldn't understand. So, of course, after the police men saw what's happening, they immediately took them out. Meanwhile, one of the two women actually, who was in the room, who was attacking me inside the lecture, came to me with a plate of food. And she was so nice. Like, she seems like as if she wants to apologize for what she did in the lecture. And she's smiling and funny and fun and giving me a plate of food. And actually this food was not grape leaves, it's cabbage leaves,
yes,
with rice in it. So you cannot see what's inside.
As we say in Hebrew.
Yes. So you cannot see what's inside. So I asked her, is this rice or beef? She hesitated for a moment. She couldn't answer. And she said, I don't know. It's my mother made it. At that moment, I knew there is something wrong with this food. And actually, it was also the opinion of the policeman who thought there is something wrong in this food.
Oh my God.
Otherwise, why all of a sudden she became so nice and she wants to give it to me? And she lied about something very interesting about her identity. I asked her, where are you from originally? She said, I'm a Syrian Moroccan. And then later on, when the investigations started, when the FBI started the investigations on the issue and also through other resources, we learned that she's not Syrian, she's not Moroccan, she's Palestinian from Gaza. Oh. And no one knows how she entered the United States. There are no records documenting how she entered the United States.
Probably illegally.
I am sure it's illegally, perhaps through the borders, the southern borders of America or something. But the thing is that my story, what happened to me here, tells us that those jihadists, because these are jihadists, they wanted to hurt me.
Yeah.
They really wanted to hurt me, are abusing the space of free speech inside the US and other Western societies to silence people like me, to silence the people who are calling for peace with Israel, to silence the people who are speaking against Hamas. And this is very dangerous, why the United States is allowing them. It's crazy. I know there is a big respect for free speech here, but this is not free speech.
They're using, as you say, the values of this country to shut everybody down.
Absolutely. And also to hurt people.
Yeah.
They are jihadists. Yeah. Even if they are dressing like Americans or dressing like Westerners, but they are jihadists. And we have to be very, very, very careful about how they are behaving.
Well, Dalia, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I mean, you've been through quite a lot this year. Yeah. Your original sin, of course, was to say Hamas was bad after October 7th.
Yes.
You've had to seek asylum. Yeah. And you're still brave enough to go and speak pro-peace and pro-integration in the region. And so we're eternally grateful for your friendship, for your advocacy, and for your bravery. And please, God, we're going to keep seeing great things from you, Dalia. Thank you.
Thank you. Together we will make the change happen. We will win this battle.
Inshallah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Flor.
It's
always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
And now, of course, our favorite segment of the Quad, Scumbags and Heroes. Well, obviously, we're going to start with scumbags. Shama, who do you have for us this week?
My scumbag this week is obviously Marvel Comics, who decided to cancel a superhero only because she's Israeli. This level of erasure personally really offends me. I grew up in Morocco and North Africa, and it was very, very hard to find references and models of what it has meant to be a Jew in the Arab world in North Africa. I had to go through so much unearthing, uncovering, research to really understand Jewish identity in general and Jewish history in the Middle East and North Africa. And a big grievance that I had is the lack of representation. So how dare you, Marvel Comics, that in the name of inclusion, you completely exclude Jewish and Israeli voices and representation and completely target someone a character at the intersection and an actress at the intersection of multiple minority statuses, being a woman, being a Jew, being Israeli. It's just so deeply disappointing. Do better.
And I just want to add to that. I was reading this morning that Marvel actually changed the character's, description, removed the Israeli Jewish aspect, and instead made her
a Russian spy.
A Russian spy.
Which is
at the same
crazy.
time, Russia is bombing hospitals in Ukraine and killing innocent children and shipping weapons to terrorists all over the world, and is banned from the Olympic Games and all number of sports because of the activities of their government.
But who are we going to boycott?
The person they're going to boycott, the character they're going to erase, is an Israeli, a Jewish Israeli.
And if I can just add for fun, I was just checking online because I suspected this since we control the media. Marvel Comics was founded by a Jewish man.
Of course.
So I'd love to know who owns it now, and a hex on you, whoever you are. I'm sure it's no longer privately controlled.
Vivian, who's your scumbag or scumbags?
So I'm sticking with a well-worn path, and I'm going at the Haredim, who were rioting. They don't want to, 15% of the population continues to feel, even when we have this terrible need for soldiers and others to participate in civic life in Israel, they feel they should be exempted. They were rioting last night in Bnei Brak and apparently attacked 2 IDF officers who, I'm not sure if they were there to help control the crowd, probably not. They may have been there for other reasons, but they were physically attacked by these ultra-Orthodox young men who were rioting and saying they should never have to be drafted. And they called these IDF officers murderers. I just think, we talked earlier about extremes and ugly language and violence. This is ours. And I think that we need to deal with it
Because if you don't nip it in the bud, and it's already developed, but if you don't deal with it now, it will only be worse later.
Yeah, it's just time. As we were saying earlier before we started filming, we all like roads and bridges and highways and airports, and so do the Haredim. And if you want to live in this state, then you have to participate. End of discussion. You just don't get to make the rules for yourself.
Absolutely. Well, to move to my scumbag of the week, this week there is an Australian senator, Lidia Thorpe is her name. Now, she's been very, very anti-Israel for quite a long time. It's nothing new. But she recently posted a photo of herself with a green headband, we'll show it, that looks like the Hamas logo, the Hamas headbands that they wore when they crossed into Israel on October 7th and raped and kidnapped hundreds of people. So this Lidia Thorpe, who apparently loves Hamas, created this headband or joined into this campaign that was created by someone else, I'm not sure which, in which it has the Hamas logo, but it's not the Hamas logo. They changed the Arabic calligraphy to say, I love chocolate milk. This is not funny, and I'm not sure why people think that dressing up like terrorists who committed these heinous acts and who filmed themselves committing these heinous acts in order to terrorize Jewish communities around the world, as well as others throughout the Western world in particular. I'm not sure why anyone would find that entertaining. And even if other people say, oh, well, why are you wearing a Hamas logo? So they can say, oh, no, it says I love chocolate milk. Like this is not cute. You're not doing anything positive for Palestinians. Certainly presenting something that appears as if it's Hamas is not helping Palestinians. They, Hamas, are the reason that so many Palestinians are dying. And so I just think that this is disgraceful, this whole campaign, this chocolate milk thing. But on top of that, to see a democratically elected official in Australia take part in this as if it's funny, it's just so disrespectful to the victims, frankly, on both sides. But you know, in our case, of course, as an Israeli, it's deeply, deeply offensive to be making light, to be making jokes about such serious events where people are literally dying every day. There's no excuse for this kind of behavior.
It just goes to show that like fantasy of Western democratic people who are so removed from the region, who are so privileged in their lives, but still have this like deep fantasy to cosplay and to play oppressed.
Yeah.
And will kind of go
well,
out.
She is Aboriginal, so, you know.
Yeah, but still.
Yeah, I'm with you, but I just, you know.
Yeah.
She's
you can be Aboriginal
oppressed
and have Western democratic privilege.
Yeah.
And that should not be taken for granted.
Yeah. But either way, you shouldn't be supporting a murderous terrorist organization. That really helps no one. And so I'll leave it at that. Lidia Thorpe, you are my scumbag of the week. Moving on to heroes. Who do we have as a hero this week? It's funny, we always have more trouble finding our heroes. I think we need more heroes in our society. But Shama, who's your hero this week?
My hero is actually a really unique and great story from Casablanca, Morocco, where I was born and grew up. This past week, in a graduation ceremony, the Dean of Sciences in a massive and major university in Ben Msik region in Casablanca decided to not hand the diploma of one of the graduates because she was wearing a keffiyeh over her shoulders, and a Palestinian keffiyeh, and made it a statement to say that he would not hand her the diploma because she's clearly politically biased, taking a political stance, which in French is prise de position politique. And he basically left the scene, and someone else had to hand her a diploma. And I think that's a really powerful example to show, especially for our audiences and in the West, because so much of what we've seen in America and in Europe has been the complete opposite, right? We have gone so far as to schools and universities canceling graduation because it has become so unsafe for Jewish students and, frankly, other students with just differing political opinions to be in the same spaces as the pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas supporting mobs. And it also goes to show that across the Arab world, there are people and brave voices who understand that the pro-Palestinian and pro-terrorism stance and chants are often used as a proxy for terrorism. And moderates in the Arab world are rising to say enough with that. Another example is what happened in the UAE when a student who yelled Free Palestine during a graduation ceremony was deported. I have to explain that when I first moved to the UAE, I had this sort of Western democratic progressive lens. And I looked at everything critically like that. And I really initially was disappointed with what I perceived as lack of democracy. It turns out all of those people, activists and organizations that were fueling that kind of protest and those kinds of movements on the ground had intimate ties with Islamist organizations, with the Islamic Republic, with the Muslim Brotherhood, with the Qatari regime.
I have to jump in and just point out McGill, University of Montreal, which McGill and Toronto are terrible. They're basically Samidoun Central, which is
horrific.
Yeah, it is horrific. But at the McGill, one of the McGill graduation ceremonies, there was a young woman in keffiyeh. Everyone's in keffiyeh. It's just the thing. Went on stage to receive her diploma and took the opportunity to spit on the university president and another very senior official and shouted out something about Palestine or Israel or genocide and left with her degree. Left. I mean, there has to be an ethical reason to revoke that. But that type of scene, not the spitting, but that kind of behavior, shouting slogans on stage, that's just been a kind of, de rigueur across Canada at university grads. It's appalling.
Yeah.
And no one stands up to it. Yeah. So wonderful to hear that they're doing so in Casablanca. And I think it's so cool that you get to say, I was born and raised in Casablanca. Because I think that,
You'll have to come visit.
The movie.
Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
A kiss, everything.
Of course, of course.
It's nothing like the movie.
Oy.
Just put it out.
It's not, it's better. I love
Casablanca. Like,
love that city.
poetry. Okay.
And your hero, Vivian.
My hero, I'm staying local again. My hero is another repeat for me, Eyal Eshel, the father of Ronnie Eshel. Ronnie Eshel was one of the Tatzpitaniot, the IDF scouts at the Nahal Oz base on October 7th. She was murdered by Hamas gruesomely, horrifically. Her father, Eyal, is absolutely intrepid, indefatigable. He does not stop. And he has been appearing constantly on TV, at ceremonies, hounding the government, hounding the IDF for the colossal failure to protect, especially the female soldiers who were unarmed and were supposed to be protected by armed soldiers. Their heartbreaking pleas on the army radio calling for help went unanswered. The commander for the Southern Unit was on holiday, and Eyal Eshel is ceaseless. And this week he's organizing 3 days of events in the area around Gaza, where I now live. And they are intended to bring attention, again, to what happened and to the fact that 9 months later, we still have no commitment from the government to convene a state commission of inquiry, which this country, many feel, myself included, we cannot move forward without knowing how deep and wide and serious the rot was and is. We can't cover it up. We can't wait for years, and we can't wait until Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decides that he's leaving politics to have it. So, kudos to Eyal Eshel. He will not relent. I will not relent. Many are supporting him in this effort. And, I just want to close on this thought that on October 7th, it took 9 hours for the IDF to show up. Many of the kibbutzim had already been completely destroyed. The Hamas guys had left with their hostages and had murdered everyone. They were done in many of the kibbutzim by 1:30 in the afternoon. The IDF started showing up shortly after 3:30 that afternoon. That's 9 hours after the attack began. It doesn't take 9 hours to drive from the northern tip to the southern tip of this country. Where was the IDF? And people need to know.
Well, I'm with you on pretty much every single word, and I also have to applaud, of course, the Eshel family, but all of the families of hostages have been like just unbelievable courage and strength throughout this time.
But Eyal he's with them on everything, but his thing is the Commission of Inquiry.
Well, we need it.
We do.
We need it. So my hero or heroes this week, I'll be brief, but basically I wanted to applaud the people, the Democrats and Republicans in the U.S., as well as other world leaders who responded to the attempted assassination of Trump by raising awareness and speaking out against the level of rhetoric that we're seeing, kind of what I talked about earlier, that if so-and-so wins, then it's the end of the world, it's the end of democracy, speaking out against this kind of rhetoric. And I actually have to give it to President Biden, because almost immediately he spoke out strongly against it. His administration has been consistent on this. The DNC, the Democrats, they pulled a lot of their attack ads on Trump. And I think that is the appropriate and respectful thing to do at a time like this. I'm sure they'll continue at some point. We are in an election season. But to see that immediate response from political enemies, we also saw a bipartisan effort, a new legislation to increase Secret Service security around all presidential candidates. That was coming from Richie Torres and Mike Lawler, Republican and Democrat working together. And I think that this is exactly what we need to see more of. We need to see a lot more cooperation. Even if there's not unity on all of these issues, there's not gonna be. It's a lot of intense political issues. But to be able to see the other person as human, to be able to work across the aisle, much like we saw in the previous government with Naftali Bennett. Don't be mistaken, Naftali Bennett does not support Mansour Abbas, who sat in the coalition with him. He's an Islamist leader. But they still found a way to work together on certain issues, and that's what we need to focus on, and we need to encourage and speak about more rather than the radicalism. So those are my heroes of the week. And with that, we finish another episode of The Quad, sadly without Fleur, but next week I'm sure she'll be back, or when we return, she'll be back, and we will
tell our audience that this is my last...
we don't like this.
This is my last
I'm not saying that on purpose.
But it has been a pleasure to be with you, ladies.
It's been great to have you.
Champions of liberty, freedom, and Zionism. And Queens of Israel. I feel really privileged to have shared the stage with you.
We're privileged.
Deeply empowered, and really feel like I've done therapy for the last month and a half. So thank you for the opportunity, and many thanks to Fleur, who's not with us. And I look forward to watching you from New York.
Absolutely. Well, be sure to like and follow us to get all the episodes and all the new clips from The Quad. Thank you for joining us.